21. And our calling number is 563-999-3581, and press 1, and that puts you into queue to talk to us. And we'd love to hear your comments and questions because that makes this your show. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, dear heart, and welcome, everybody. Honored and delighted that you're here to share this conversation as we move forward into the arena of first century Aramaic forgiveness and recognize the truth of who we are as human beings. One of the games that what we call the non-being mind likes to play is I can cut myself off from something inside of me and pretend it's not there and live above it as though it has no impact on my life. And the mistake we make when we think that way is that whatever it is that I'm hiding from myself is going to be the first order of impact in my life. And so if I never learn to resolve that, I get to live in the why is this happening to me again experience, or some people call it the why are they doing this to me again, or why am I doing this to myself again? And so the upshot of this work is to stand in the space of willingness where I will allow myself to access and face everything in me that is unlike that state that Dr. Tim was just talking about, the fact that we are literally created in the image and likeness of love, that we are in our essential nature, quite literally, the presence of love. And so we want to move into that level of understanding and then acquire the tools. Then, having acquired the tools, enter into the practice of accessing the parts of our minds that perhaps for generations we have been in denial of and dissociated from, and wonder why it keeps coming to bite us in the butt. So I'm having this conversation with Richard. We're starting the class out, the show out every day with a little bit of reading from the book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And we've just been informing Richard that reality is the output of the human mind, is a construct of the human mind, and that every construct comes from the human mind, always tells us first and foremost about the contents of that mind. Always tells us more than it tells us about the world we think we're looking at. And so we've just gone over that idea with Richard, the character in the book. And we're on the bottom of page 34, chapter 6, if you want to follow along with us. So I'm talking to Richard, and I talked him through his fear of feeling sadness about what he'd uncovered, helping to create a safe space for him to be honest with himself. He spoke again of his fear of being destroyed by what might surface. Richard's fear of being destroyed was an old reality that needed to be exposed fully in order to be healed. I assured him that it was safe to look at whatever came to his mind. I invited him to be aware that a memory of pain is just a memory, and he did not need to re-empower his old pain as though it were true, a present moment pain. He had survived the trauma when he first felt it and locked the experience into his body. He would survive its release as the old energy moved out of the system. Within moments, through simple breathing and accepting that he was safe, Richard was feeling better and seemed surprised at how much easier it had become to breathe. What happened, he said, amazed at the relief he was suddenly feeling. Breathing through the surfacing of old hidden pain allows the release of those feelings. I suspect people will find you easier to get along with in the future, and you will probably see an easing in your relationship with your mother. What a relief, he sighed. It's interesting to observe how these issues relate to each other. This really takes concentration and work, doesn't it? Yes, it takes courage to face yourself and be vulnerable enough to feel your true feelings and honest enough to look at your real thoughts. And then the book presents a key thought. Life is an opportunity to heal. Use it well. I think the most important piece of work you've done in the last few minutes was the next link you made. You thought that you destroyed people by attacking them needlessly. Did you notice that insight came on the heels of living with my mom was like walking through a minefield? That sequence of thoughts said to me that, as a child, there was a good chance you felt destroyed by what you perceived as your mother's attacks. It was probably too much for a young mind to confront, so the belief remained hidden until this moment. In the denial of that reality, your mind showed you only evidence of a loving mother, and at the same time, blamed her for your hurt feelings. Richard's inability to look directly at his thoughts of blame caused him to surface what he least expected. They would run out of control and cause his actions to be out of proportion with the situations he faced. His blame thoughts became generalized. His reaction, attacking the waitress in our earlier example, was generalized from the realities learned from early interactions with the mother who attacked to protect herself. This dynamic was the source of the emotional explosions that drove people away, the type of reverberations that often go on for decades after the original reason for blaming has passed. The belief that another is responsible for the output of your mind is a result of projection. And so we're going to finish the reading there and recognize that, what the world calls projection, usually what the world tells us about projection is that there's something inside of me and I put it out there on you. But that's not projection at all. That's externalization. Projection happens when someone comes along that resonates certain content in my mind, and because I'm in denial and I've dissociated from that content, I can't look at it directly and honestly as it is. What I do is I make pictures out of it. The mind has this unique ability, and that is it converts digital information into pictures. So the reason the mind is so tricky is that when you have a thought, oh, this is your fault, your mind literally generates a picture that shows you that this is their fault. And until I forgive as to that picture, I'm going to literally see an evidential piece of information, a projected reality that somebody else is responsible for what's moving in me and what's causing the feelings that I'm experiencing. When I realize that the feelings I'm experiencing are always caused by what's moving in me, and I'm putting it into my brain's image of others, that is projecting it, I realize that I'm stuck in projection, and it's just time to let it go, time to get free of the projections and get back to the truth of who we are as human beings and functioning out of our true nature, which is the active presence of love. So that's what we're here to understand. The forgiveness tool, in order to, in the context of this conversation, in order to see how the forgiveness tool operates, if you look at the 7-step wake-up sheet, you start out recognizing, acknowledging that you're loved, and you acknowledge what you're feeling. And then you start looking into the situation, and you look for the thought disorders that are creating the untoward feelings. As you look at those thought disorders and begin to dissolve them by exposing them to the active presence of love, then your projections collapse. Now, if they're not going down really easily, when you get down to step 5 in the worksheet, you'll notice that in step 4, you've consciously, purposely brought forward the presence of love. That's the healer. And then in step 5, you look at the goal that was driving this particular perception and recognize that goals literally recruit content from the mind, conscious or unconscious, and build quite literally the world you see out of it. If the world you see contains some form of hostility or fear, then you've dissociated from that hostility or fear and projected into your brain's image of perhaps yourself or perhaps someone else. What you need at that moment is a tool of collapse. And the tool of collapse is called forgiveness. In the Aramaic language, the word forgive is shabag, and it literally translates to cancel, to let loose, or to untie. So when I realized that, let's say I just want this person to be caring with me, and they say something, like in the instance with Richard, that brings up this old pained reality, then even if their words were wonderful, gentle, respectful words, if my filters are set for irritation or hostility, those words will trigger something that I've dissociated from, and I'll build a picture of them being the threat in my life. And the reason that happens is because I have a goal for them to be a certain way. Now you say, well, Michael, what's wrong with having a goal for people to act in a caring manner toward you? Nothing. That's a wonderful goal. Everybody on the planet should have that for everybody all the time and should have that goal fulfilled. But if that goal isn't being fulfilled and I go into hostility or fear, what someone says to me is, I went into all this irritation and upset when they weren't being kind to me. What they just told me is in the file in their mind on kindness, there's irritation and upset. And so I don't cancel the goal because there's anything wrong with the goal. Perfectly good goal. I cancel the goal because when I put it in my mind, it recruits content based in hostility or fear. And now my perception is degraded and I'm living in a projection, believing that what's going on inside of me is outside of me. If you've ever had somebody accuse you, anybody that's listening, ever had somebody accuse you of saying something you absolutely never said or doing something that absolutely never happened? Ever been there, done that? Everybody in a workshop will raise their hands and kind of give a laugh to that. Yeah. Notice the state that the people who were in that accusatory mode that told you that you did something that you didn't do, you said something you didn't say, notice the state of mind that they were in. Notice 100% of the time they're in some form of hostility or fear. That's when projection happens. So when I cancel the goal, I don't cancel the goal because there's anything incorrect about the goal. I cancel the goal because when I load it in my mind, it brings hostility or fear to the surface. When I cancel the goal in the middle of that hostility or fear surfacing, then I get to start to remove that hostility or fear. And that's when life really begins to rock. Because we displace hostility and fear with the active presence of love. And the underlying dissociated hostility or fear is removed. Remember that forgiveness is removal. So that's what we're here to do. We're here to remove all forms of hostility or fear and be restored to the true nature of a human being. That is, be restored to functioning as the active presence of love. So in a nutshell, that's kind of one of the core tools. And Miss Jeanie, do we have anybody in the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room?
No, on both fronts. There's a lot of people in both places, but no questions. Oh, a hand just went up. And
Great.
Grace was on during the first hour, and I believe she raised her hand a second time. You're on, Grace.
Welcome. Hey there, young lady. How are you? Are you with us, Grace? Your microphone's turned on. I'm not hearing anything. I was going to say I haven't heard your voice in a couple of years, and I still am not hearing your voice.
Michael?
Oh, there
Michael,
she is.
can you hear me now?
Okay.
You're loud and clear.
Hi, guys. I did have
welcome.
my hand up. Hi. I'm not going to speak on the first half. This is something different. But I did have my hand up. I just want to clarify with the lady. Now, how would it look like when you're doing the sheets, and it says there on the sheets that, and I've heard you mention it before, that healing isn't pretty. So would that mean that once all these things that are coming out from me, from the healing, now, is that going to be painful and is all the time? How much pain am I going to get to clear things out?
You won't experience more pain than there is already within you that you are now experiencing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But you're experiencing it mostly unconsciously. When you step into the healing process and true forgiveness steps in, then you become aware of what you've been hiding from yourself. What you'll find is things like addictions. If there are any kind of addiction, smoking or coffee or caffeine or sugar or junk food or drugs or whatever. Once you let go of the addictions, then you get to feel what's there. And so what people find is as they work through their addictions, they work through their pain, all of a sudden there's room for me to take a breath and just soften into the presence of love. You'll know that you're making progress when you're in the middle of your muddle. Everything's up in your face. Man, here's I'm at the core of healing a big issue here. And I can stop for a moment and take a breath and still attune to the love within. I can get quiet and just go to that. Yep, all that other stuff's moving, but you'll know you're making progress when you can just stop for a minute, take a breath, and tap into the presence of love that you are. And more as you do that, the pain dissolves, and it's going, on the way, it's an energy. On the way into the system, it created certain pain symptoms. On the way out of the system, the symptoms will be identical. The only difference is the direction the energy is moving. And accelerates the healing process, moves it faster, is a willingness to embrace what's there. If I go kicking and screaming, I don't want to deal with this, I don't want to feel this is terrible, and I shut my breath down, I can stretch that pain out for weeks, months, years. I've seen people do it. If I step into willingness and I choose to breathe, okay, so I'm going to just let myself move through this. All of a sudden I can soften into that and literally in an instant be through the release of whatever that pain is. But, if it went in, it's like when you clean your house. If you've let your house go for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, the cleaning is going to be pretty messy. But if you're going to have a clean house, you just have to go through it. And so it is with living in a world of denial, dissociation, hostility, and fear. Does that make sense of your question?
Yes, it does. So what are you saying, that once you get that feeling that comes up again that you're going to discard, if you just breathe, it'll dissolve, but what would it look like if you resist it?
It's just going to look like, elongated pain and trauma. It's like, gee, this is just never ending.
No, but what are the things that people do that resist the healing or dissolving of that energy?
Well, I'm rolling along, and let's see, my old addiction is cigarettes, and I'm rolling along and say, I'm starting to feel a little irritated, and I think I need a cigarette. So there's my resistance. I just put 500 chemicals into my brain and into my bloodstream that inhibits me from feeling what's moving in me.
Okay, so you give in.
Like. Or it might look like,
if you had a childhood trauma, if you had a childhood trauma, how would that look like resisting?
Well, let me share a true story. There's a woman that we've done a lot of work with over the years. She was originally introduced to this work almost 40 years ago up in Michigan, and she isn't actually a naturopath, but she's as close to being a naturopathic physician as anybody that I know. and she lives on a high live food diet, primarily fresh and raw food, and teaches this type of work. She came back to this work after about 30 years and really dug in and started doing worksheets big time. And in naturopathic circles, oftentimes dairy is referred to as cow pus, because each state has a limit on how much pus is allowed in their milk and in their cream and in their their butter and such. So we kind of jokingly refer to it as cow pus. And she called me, and she was really seriously digging in. She was listening to 2 and 3 radio shows a day out of the archives, and she was doing worksheets, and she was really moving through things. And she called me one day and she said, "Michael, I don't understand. I don't know what to do. I mean, I don't do cow pus. I don't do that. And I have been going to the store and buying ice cream and eating it by the quart, and I just can't help myself. I'm driven to that.
Wow.
What's going on?" I said, "Well, what are you dealing with?" I've been doing a lot of worksheets around my dad. Her dad was from the Middle Eastern mindset of men are the gift to women, and was fairly abusive. I said, "Well, so tell me about what's happening. What are you going through with Dad?" "Well, I'm dealing with a lot of that childhood abuse. It was physical abuse." And I said, "Well, after Dad had done his physical abuse, what would he do when he wanted to make it up for you?" "Oh, my God, he'd take me out for ice cream."
Wow, okay.
One of the symptoms of healing is you go for there's a craving for the drug that was used originally to shut that down. So here's this woman who wouldn't touch ice cream, and she is uncontrollably just chowing down on it. That would be what resistance, when I fall back into one of those drugs. And so recognizing that, I get to work through it.
Right. Okay, I understand now. I overstand.
Cool. All
Thank you.
Hey, delighted, honored, glad to be on the team. Glad to hear your voice. It's probably been, 2 or 3 years. So glad you're back.
It's raspy. I haven't slept in a while. Thank you, though.
Okay. All right. Lots of love and blessings. Take care.
To you too, guys. Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. So we're still, we've got, about 40 minutes left. So we've got lots of room for conversation. If you're out there in the listening audience and you're on one of those stations where we cannot see you in our control panel, if you just pick up your phone and dial 563-999-3581, then you'll be listening to the show on your phone. And if you push 1, we'll be having a conversation. We'd love to hear from you. What's on your mind? Is this whole explanation, this process, making sense for you? Is there any way we can support you?
Everybody's quiet today.
Uh-huh. So if you're out there in listener land, if we had this conversation about healing, protection, there's quite a bit of data that we covered in just 20 minutes or so. Addiction, shutting down the vitality of the field so that one of the symptoms of healing is that I crave the drug I used originally to shut that down. And literally, as I'm breaking down the energetic patterns of what I've denied and dissociated from, the way that I was able to devitalize myself enough to keep that hidden was by using that drug. And so as that energetic pattern starts to break loose, literally the energetic signature, if not the actual molecules of the original addictive substance, are locked into that pattern. And when it opens, that energy of that addiction starts to release. And when it comes to mind, this is an especially important piece of information to understand. If you're moving away from, let's say you've been in an AA program or NA or something like that, OA, you're moving away from an addiction, to recognize that part of the healing process is that there's going to be this craving for the drug I used initially. You know, the alcoholic. We've all heard of the alcoholic. You know, he's been sober for 30 years, just celebrated getting his 30-year chip, and he's so excited. And in that excitement, and everybody there congratulating him, he's at a whole new level of vitality. At that new level of vitality, what happens? Some of his old garbage starts to break loose. If that garbage is breaking loose, he used alcohol as his anesthetic, then there's going to be literally the energy signature of alcohol leaving his field, and he's going to be able to think of nothing but alcohol. If he doesn't know that that's part of the healing process, chances are he's going to fall off the wagon. Whereas once you understand, it's like, oh, I hear there's that old craving. Oh, geez, I haven't thought of that in decades. There it is. And I can breathe, and I can recognize, this is my healing process, and I can just move through it. And that's what we're here to support. So how can we support you? What's on your mind? And if I were in your hometown presenting these ideas, I've literally covered what could take hours of deeper explanation to do in just 20 minutes or so. If I were, on the platform at your local library or university or church or jail, and you were sitting in the audience, and I stepped off the platform and walked down to the audience, and you were sitting there, and then I know just about everybody listening would walk over to me and say, Michael, what about? So that's what this space is for on this radio show. If you were one of those people who, if you were in the audience and heard what I just spoke about, what would your question be? What about, can you clarify this for me? Then push 1 and ask the question. Sometimes people are like, well, voice is kind of shaky. Be on the radio show. I don't think, can you make it okay for your voice to be shaky and just go through that? Well, my questions aren't important. I'm kind of new at this, so I don't even really know what to ask. Your questions are important. In fact, sometimes for the most advanced student, the most basic question is what takes them back to truth and back to some of the things that they've missed. So what's on your mind? Hello, hello. Push 1, let's have a conversation. Otherwise, we can talk a little bit more about the symptoms of healing. And what are the symptoms of healing? Well, it happens on 3 levels, physical, mental, and emotional. Oh, great. Let's say hello.
808, you are on the air.
Aloha, is this
Hi.
Roma?
Yeah.
Hey, young lady, how are you?
Mr. Michael?
It be me. I'm here.
Well, I just wanted to let you know that when you were talking to Grace, the last 4 words that came out of your mouth, I just felt this flow of love just pouring through my body. And, in this last 5 minutes when you've been, saying, oh, what if I were talking in your town and I came off the podium, trying to encourage somebody to call, I just was laying there and I was thinking, I'm just a big puddle of love.
All right.
And all a big puddle of love wants to do is just lie there and be a big puddle of love. So I just thought I'd give you a little bit of feedback why sometimes we don't call in. Because, everything's fine. Everything is working.
Well, the insight came to me recently that I was asking this question of what is life? And life, the flow of active present love through our cellular structure.
Yep, that's it.
When we inhibit that flow, we literally begin to die. There's a cute poem you maybe remember from the old days. I don't use this poem very often, but it comes to mind. You're in many Why Is This Happening to Me Again workshops in the old days where I would use this poem entitled Each Moment. And it goes, each moment of love, each moment of giving, each moment of joy is a moment of living. Each moment of anger, each moment of lying, each moment of resentment is a moment of dying. All our moments add together like the digits in a sum, and the answer tells us plainly whether our life or our death shall come. And what do we do to inhibit the flow of love through us, to inhibit life? And are we willing to forgive that? It just gets down to such a simple, basic equation. But not always an easy equation, but a simple one.
It's I recognize those words, and it's been 20 years since I heard them. And all I can do is just weep with gratitude, Michael.
Delighted to be on the team, young lady. That's what we're here for.
Okay. Well, I just want
to pass it on.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for saying thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Delighted and honored. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Okay. That's all the hands that are up right now.
Pretend that everybody's hand is up and just pick one. No, let's not do that. So I was going to start to talk a little bit more about the healing process. So when you recognize that this so-called body is an energy system, if we listen to Einstein says, on such things as matter, we have been all wrong. What we have heretofore called matter is energy whose vibrations have been so lowered as to be perceptible to the senses. There is no matter. Now, when you realize you don't have a body, it's not a material structure. It is energy. Relative to it, there are two qualities of energy. Tears it down. Integrative, disintegrative energy. The disintegrative energy in the ancient Aramaic was called sin. Sin is just an archery term. When you stood on the archery range and you fired at a target and you missed the bullseye, the scorekeeper would yell sin. You're off the mark. That's all it means. And so when we engage in sin, in energies that are off the mark, we begin the destruction of our physiology. When, with some form of hostility or fear, we inhibit the flow of love through ourselves, and ourselves, we enter into a disease process, a self-destructive process. So when they said the wages of sin is death, well, it's not some kind of theological threat, quote unquote, God's going to get you for your sins. They were simply saying, if you inhibit the flow of love through your structure, you begin to die. And the way you inhibit the flow of love through your structure is to allow some form of hostility or fear to flow through your structure. Are you willing to face every thought disorder based in hostility or fear and remove what never belonged? That's precisely what we're here to support you in doing. And of course, as we support you in doing it, that's precisely what we're here to learn for ourselves, to engage in the tools, and to continuously bring forward that active presence of love that is literally our human lives. And so whatever we've put into the system to inhibit the flow of love, when we wake up and begin to apply forgiveness, that energy is going to move on three levels, what we call the physical, the mental, and the emotional. So on a physical level, healing is going to look like any kind of physical symptom you've ever had and low energy. On a mental level, it's going to look like any kind of negative thought you've ever had and confusion. On an emotional level, it's going to look like any kind of negative feeling you've ever had and depression. So that's what healing looks like. A worksheet called When I Heal. And you look at exactly what your symptoms are going to be and the story your mind is going to be generating when you go through those symptoms of healing. Now, there are four things that will tell you when you're in a healing process, when you're symptomatic, am I in a disease process or am I in a healing process? First question I ask myself is, have I been doing more and more of the right things? Second question I ask myself is, before this happened, had I hit a new level of vitality? New level of vitality means that I can dig into a new depth of what I need to process through. Third question I ask myself is, what's happening with my elimination? In a healing process, there's a tendency for there to be an increase in elimination. In a disease process, there's a tendency for there to be a restriction in elimination. And we're talking about the output of all of the eliminative organs, the bowel, the urinary tract, the mucous membranes, the sinuses, the lungs, the skin, are all going to tend to increase their eliminative output in the healing process. So that's the third thing you ask yourself. And then the fourth thing is about the drugs. Is this craving that I have a drug that I used originally when this trauma happened, and I used it to shut down or avoid feeling and dealing with what was going on within me? And so the biggest accelerator of the healing process is willingness. You know, instead of going for, let me have the biggest starch sandwich I can have with all the white flour and all the sugar and all the condiments that go on it that give me an addictive sugar rush, am I willing to turn and eat a sprout salad, vitality into my structure, rather than devitalize and drive down my vitality? Do I want to heal? Then I have to go for vitality in my structure. If I'm not willing to do that, you know, that's why part of the intensive, we have this fresh and raw food program. You know, when we do an intensive at our land, our food, we don't cook anything. Everything is totally fresh and raw. And people who are scared as heck, oh, geez, I eat dead animals all the time and nothing but cooked food. I'm going to eat. What are you going to make me eat? Everything's going to be fresh and raw. And you will be amazed at once people go through the detox at how awesome that food tastes. Doesn't taste awesome to an addictive palate that's used to sugar and, you know, devitalized white flour and dead things. But when you start putting life in, it vitalizes and strengthens. And as you go through that healing process, thing begins to shift. And so we're here to bring forward that shift to every mind, heart, and being on the planet. And we would love to hear from you and what your thoughts are. What are you dealing with? How can we support you? What can we do to help clarify the process for you? Bring the tools forward in a way that are functional for you. How can we support you, in other words? What's on your mind? Again, the call-in number, if you're listening to us on one of the stations where we cannot see you in our control panel, the call-in number is 563-999-3581. I notice we don't have that little voice there, Jeanie, saying 999 today. Is she otherwise engaged?
I have been attempting to get her to take a nap for the last hour. So she's in her playroom, in the bedroom in her crib, but she's talking up a storm in there, so she hasn't gone to sleep yet.
Resistance.
Yep, for sure.
Oh, well.
But we do not
Well,
have
we
a
are
hand
blessed
up,
by her
so.
presence. Well, then somebody out there in listening land's got to have a question. So if you're out there and you have that question, share it with us. I just picked up the book. I'm still in the car. I just dropped someone off at the airport, you said earlier.
Susan Bingham just pressed her. Susan Bingham just pressed one again.
Oh, cool.
Hi guys. Jeanie, how's your dad doing?
He's doing great.
Good. Okay.
Yep.
That's great. We have a grandson who may have COVID. It's my daughter's youngest boy. He's doing all right, but he's got all the symptoms, and she's just taken him to be tested. And he's been out and about. They're very careful at his school, but he just went to see a girlfriend. You know, I think the kids, it's just very hard for them to be safe.
Tough.
But I don't have a conclusion yet. She's had both her shots, but would have to quarantine for 2 weeks. And, but anyway, it's just, all I can say is it's hitting pretty close to home in some cases now. And to say, whether you get a shot or not, that's one thing, but you can be careful. And I hope everyone is being careful out there, sort of getting on my soapbox a little, because it's easy enough to be careful. washing hands, masks. They're saying double masks now because this mutation is much more communicable than the first strain. So anyway, Michael, I wanted to say your answer to Audrey on the Zoom last night when she was going on about how upset she was about injustice. I would love to have you say it again, what you said, but I thought that is so good. What I understood is that if you set up the focus on working and thinking toward love and justice, then the level of upset will be changed, and focusing on what you don't want is a very dangerous thing anyway, so focus on what you do want and work toward that, or even just think toward that. But you said it better, and if you can dredge it up, I'd love to hear it again.
Well, my offering would be, and of course you've got the link to the video, so you can hear it again live when you choose to from the intensive. But in essence,
that's cool.
Now, people who have disturbance and upset around injustice carry a vibration. You know, you remember back to where we talked about Marcel Vogel, the 22-year senior scientist from IBM that had a camera that he could take a picture of the high energy waves that leave the mind when we think a thought. If I gather millions of people who are upset about injustice, then the high energy waves leaving all those minds are setting out the frequency of injustice, 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 injustice. And with that powerful a focus on injustice, what do you suppose is going to happen? Anybody who's playing from the other side and can victimize someone is going to be attracted into that field, and they're going to do the behavior. So my take is that most often, at least when I hear it in the world, most often what people, when they say they want justice, really means is what they want is vengeance. They want to get even. They want somebody to be punished.
Right.
You know, they'll talk about, you know, this terrible event happened, and so they took this person to court and they punished them, and justice was done. No, punishment didn't produce any healing result. There's no justice in that. And so when my input would be to move the focus into responsibility. Well, how is the victim responsible? Well, all you have to do is be in victim mindset, and you'll draw somebody to victimize you. So go in and start to work on freeing yourself of that energy of fear or anger or sadness or grief or victimhood around injustice. And you do that by taking responsibility, and all of a sudden you become a space where, when connected to love, justice automatically shows up. Healing within the environment takes place. There's an interesting video that I posted a while back, and there's a Muslim woman whose son was killed by a man, and I don't remember where this was, a major city here in the States. And in the video, it shows her attending his trial. And as she worked through her pain over her son being killed, she actually almost adopted the boy who killed him. And in her compassion recognized that here's this 18-year-old or 17-year-old kid who's in the gang world and in the anger and the rage and the fear, and if somebody shows up and they're dead. So, you know, and so she became the space of compassion, healing for this young man, and there's justice. Now healing occurs rather than punishment, which is vengeance. And when we do that, you know, when we really start to function as human beings, the whole game changes. And we move out of conversations. You know, there's so many conversations in the world today based in hate. Hate speech has just become part of the political dialogue, part of the environment of our culture. And hate speech, you know, just leaves people in this game of, first of all, they feel fulfilled when they can get a hate zinger over on somebody because they've achieved a goal. Ah, boy, I should have socked it to that liberal or that conservative or that right-winger or that left-winger, whatever it is. And they do. They get an actual endorphin rush because the achieving of a goal produces that reward. But if they really start tuning in and they're speech was that of hatred toward another, if they really start tapping into their body and listening, what they've done is they've inhibited the flow of love through their own forms.
Yeah.
And they're in a self-destruct mode. Go ahead.
There was something on Facebook that you reminded me of some time back, and you might have read about this sometime back, maybe a year or so. A white woman walking her dog felt that a big black man, was a threat somehow in Central Park, I think, in New York.
I watched that video yesterday, actually.
You did. Synchronicity?
Yes.
Well, there was something on Facebook where it said that rather than prosecuting this woman and putting her in jail, they have set up a way of educating her about racism and inner reactions and trigger responses that may or may not be true, and a new way of looking at who anybody else is. And I thought this was wonderful, but the comments, a lot of them were, oh my God, she deserves to go to jail. She's just going to repeat that again. Yeah, exactly what you're talking about. And I was just struck by that we had good comments too, like, this is enlightened. And someone said, but she's just going to do it again. And somebody else said, well, maybe she will do it again, but this is the way to go. This is the way to go. Let's have a little faith, And I just thought that was a scary and interesting discussion that was coming up. And also today in A Course in Miracles lesson, what's the exact lesson? This is the commentary. Source speaks to me, or God speaks to me through all the day. Pam Grout has a book called The Course in Miracles Experiment, and Tim Hayes has been presenting her comments as commentary for doing the Miracles lessons every day. And what she loves to do is at the head of each chapter, ahead of each lesson commentary, she has a little quote. And the quote for today is, to fight the empire, capital E, is to be infected by its derangement. That's Philip K. Dick. So that's same sort of thing. I assume empire, capital E, means the dark forces or whatever. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's probably a direct reference to the Star Wars movies, and there's an interesting scene in the first Star Wars movie that went out where, they're taking Luke Skywalker, the young, white knight, and they take him into the presence of the evil Lord, and the evil Lord shows him a map of the galaxies and explains to him that he knows exactly where his friends are who are in the resistance, and he invited Luke to watch them blow the planet up and kill all of his friends. And the evil Lord leaves his lightsaber laying right there in reach, and Luke, of course, is visibly distraught over this. He knows that's where his friends are, and he watches them blow it up. And the evil Lord turns to him and says, go ahead, hate me, go ahead, hate me, go ahead. There's a sword, kill me. And the evil Lord's life didn't matter. If they'd have gotten him to hate, he'd have been on the dark side. And people think that justified hatred is, And I did watch that video yesterday, and the commentator was commenting on how, we're so soft on this, we just let her off. And his comment was, she'll be doing it again. They did talk about an interview with a therapist who was a witness, and that the therapist that she worked with through this court-ordered program, and it's somewhat like what we've done with Loss of Living over the years, the therapist said that there was some meaningful shift in interaction for her. And I think that's something we need to trust and need to go with more. Again, the punishment model doesn't work.
Yeah. Martin Buber said, let us, above all, dare to trust. That's one thing out of I and Thou, I think, that I read in college that struck me and stayed. It's that to dare to trust, to continue to go over to the light side at every opportunity, all the time, and even with no opportunity.
Exactly. Yeah. There's an interesting film that Michael Moore created, the guy who did Bowling for Columbine. And it's called Who We Should Invade Next. Have you seen that?
No.
It came out probably a year, maybe 2 years ago. And, we weren't doing any invasions. Afghanistan was still at war and, all of that going on. And so his movie was Who Should We Invade Next? And in essence, what he does is he goes through different ideas that America has had and left behind. And he looks at some of these wonderful ideas that have taken root in different places around the world. And one of them is, if I remember correctly, I believe it was Denmark, or it was somewhere in the Scandinavian countries, where they have basically prisons without walls. And people are put in decent facilities, kind of like, the privileged here in America get the tennis court or the tennis club type environment. But people are put in those facilities. They don't have guards with guns. These people are, you've created an injustice. You're going to pay the price. So here, your family can come and visit, but here's where you stay. And people say, and it's not punitive, it's rehabilitative. And if we actually did rehabilitation, then we'd have a different game going on. But the gigantic influence of the hates and fears and rages of the non-being mind is enormous. And people just don't realize that they're literally giving away their human lives when they engage in it. And I think if we can get that point across, then we'll see more and more people waking up and choosing love. Because, after all, it is life.
Yeah.
So that's where we'd be heading. But if you haven't seen that film, you'd probably enjoy it. I mean, he goes through some educational stuff, several different things, really good stuff. And, of course, he's doing that kind of tongue-in-cheek, where we should invade next.
Oh, yeah, right.
And
knowing him, I figured,
it's like, let's go gather some good ideas that were originally American ideas that went to different parts of the world, and let's bring them back and engage in them here in America. So.
Right.
So, it is good.
I have a question about the worksheet. I think I probably know the answer, but I'd love to hear yours. When I do a worksheet now, almost as soon as I put down the trigger, the feeling, I'm getting enlightened goals.
Yeah.
And I don't jump over the goal. I stay the course, but in that little line toward the end it says, and I also see that. I now feel and I see that. In the I see that part are all the fragments of the enlightened goal that are popping into my head already. And then I go back and do my do stuff, because you have to do the stuff, not being right, not creating a new story to make myself right all over again from another angle, etc. But I was going to ask on the thing last night, so many other comments were so good that I kept sitting on my hands, because it's not a necessary question, but have you ever had anybody else say that happens to them once they get familiar with the worksheet?
Yeah, I think that's, what we're doing is we're training carbon-based memory how to support us. And so once we've put that in deeply enough that those brain cells fire at an amplitude as high or higher than the trauma, then the mind is just going to start to slip through the process in an instant. And that to me, that's like one of the benefits of doing your work, is that you've trained your mind to support you, and it's doing its job, and it just moves the process along that much faster, rather than getting locked into and lost in the thought disorders that you're about healing. So, and oftentimes people will expect the old trauma construct from the mind, and they're almost shocked when they start, it's kind of like looking around. Where is it? Where is that terror, that trauma, that rage, whatever it is? And it's just gone. It's literally gone. And reliably,
so weird. It's like
over time, if some people Exactly. And with a commitment, literally every form of hostility or fear can simply be dissolved. That's the idea of the wake-up sequence.
Mhm. Okay. Well, I figured it wasn't a bad thing because I'm sticking the course and getting the benefits, and usually the benefits include another worksheet or 2 or 3 or 4 because other stuff
Nice.
pops up. But yeah.
Very cool. Right on track. That's what we're here to do.
Well,
And get
that's
clearer
good.
and better at it all the time. So anything else on your mind for today?
Not really, except that Dr. Tim is about to interview an author that is a friend of my daughter's, went to Vassar with her, and who writes for young audiences. But I swear, it's too bad to say that because these books are for everybody. But there's a woman in there. The book is called Trowbridge Road, and the author is Marcella Pixley. And
Right.
it's an absolutely beautiful book. And at the end, she's actually suggesting that people look into, I think it's NAMI. It's a free access to mental health counseling and support for anybody, whether they can support it or not. And it's enlightened. It goes by what Journey's Dream does, is that we may or may not use medications, but in the end, we can heal. We can heal from this. This is not a done deal
Right.
with mental illness. But one of her main characters in the book is a grandmother named Nana Jean. And Nana Jean is like a perfect example of a woman in full human life. And it isn't as if she hasn't had trauma. She's actually a guardian for her daughter's son because the daughter is on drugs and has gone AWOL. But she maintains a warm, loving, non-confrontative household for this boy and a friend who has a similar household situation, and these kids come together. Trowbridge Road, it's an absolutely gorgeous read, and Dr. Tim is about to interview her. I'm thrilled.
Oh, sweet.
He's going to do it. Yeah, she agreed to be interviewed, and
Awesome.
she's won prizes for her work, and it's a magically beautifully written book in every way, just gorgeous to read. If anybody out there is looking for a great book.
Well, thank you for letting us know. Do you know when Tim's interview is?
I think it's tomorrow. I don't know if it's going to be
Cool.
aired tomorrow, but I think he interviewed another woman whose book I've been reading. It's called We Are the Luckiest, and the author is, let me find, I wrote it down, McCowan. Anyway, it's a woman who overcame addiction by going through all of her denials. Totally honest woman who was willing to shine the light on all of the stuff she did, to bring it to the light so that other people can read it and be helped and not feel that they're the worst thing that ever hit the planet, because she's done some pretty impressive stuff, but ended up
Laura,
on her
Sweet.
feet. So we
Okay,
are
we're
the
right at
luckiest.
the last second. We are the luckiest. All right. The phone's going to cut us off in